Curio Cards are back on the show. I'm here with Daniel Friedman. He is one of the original Curio Cards artists, the one who created cards number 24 through 26, which weren't the most rare, but now within recent events over the last year are the most rare. And there's a lot of stories. And Daniel's also gone on to do a handful of things since Curio Cards. So I'm very excited for this conversation because everybody in Curio has such an interesting story of how they got there and then kind of what happened in between the introduction of Curio to the rediscovery. So Daniel, thank you for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
I absolutely appreciate it. I guess the best way to start, I know you've been on a few podcasts before. I actually think you were Adam McBride's first ever guest in the historical space. And yeah, when I've done a bunch of research. So to just tell us, let's just start with just tell us a little bit about yourself. What did you do kind of before crypto, and how did you get your way into being one of the original artists of Curio Cards?
Sure. So there's many places to begin, but I'm a biology researcher, and I was always curious about computers, learning about programming, learning about cryptographic different aspects as they were also developing over the last decade plus. And the way I got to Curio was it was 2017, and I was a graduate student at Stanford. I was interested in a lot of different crypto activities. So I was participating in discussions on crypto and law, identity, governance, and decision-making, a lot of peripheral areas, let's say, to the economic of crypto. And also for my whole life, I've been making art, primarily drawings on paper with ink. And I came across a Google form. Haven't been able to find the source of where that form came to me from, but filled out a form that was, from my perspective, in 2017, which was during the ERC20 ICO explosion, Cambrian explosion phase. It was indistinguishable from my perspective from just submitting art to an art show. Online art show was how it was described. I thought, sounds great. Down the hatch, and didn't really hear back. And so stayed on in the crypto game, continued to go to conferences and learn about the technology and continued doing art, finished up grad school, 2019, kept on continuing with biology and research. And then in the beginning of 2021, I started getting some emails asking if I had Curio cards. And I barely even connected the dots because there wasn't really a follow-up from that initial submission. And then actually it was Adam McBride inviting me onto his show and filling me in live, which caught me up. And so that was in the beginning of 21. And I guess that's only a bit more than a year ago, but a lot has changed since then.
Wow, so they never notified you that you were accepted into the collection, and there was no communication? Did you even know what Travis or Thomas or anybody in the Curio community had looked like? There was no physical contact?
It was all email, although interestingly, I was pretty close, being in the Bay Area, and a lot of them were in the San Francisco Bitcoin group. And it's all well that ends well, as they say. And I could check my email for some more details, but pretty much the contact was dropped in 2017. And it was just a busy and a volatile time in crypto. And it wasn't really my focus. I just kept on drawing, kept on researching, and just like every other art show I've ever applied for, and oh, we used your picture, or no, we didn't. I was just like, okay, great. There was no NFT acronym, although of course later the Curio technology, which is a modified ERC20, would go on to be cited in some of the later NFT standards. And the NFT acronym itself and all of this area arising was not happening in 2017. So yes, it felt a lot more like submitting to an art magazine where there's literally no difference whether you got it or not. And yeah, and then when 2021 came around and people were getting more interested in the NFT archaeology, looking back through history, trying to understand the antecedents of where a lot of the 2021 and 22 developments happened. That's again why there was more interest being brought to Curio then.
It is quite an incredible story, and I'll pull up the cards here in a second. What is the inspiration behind your art? It sounds like you've been doing it for quite a long time, even before Curio, and even some of the stuff that you have behind you looks very similar to some of the cards. So it seems like there's some sort of main theme that's progressed throughout your career.
Yes, I think right there's 26, which I guess we'll look at soon, but that's the only piece on my wall that I made. I'd say the commonality between my art style of drawing and my sort of interior design approach, which is once I start a pattern, I kind of have to take it to the completion or beyond phase for it to be done. I think there's some completeness thing in there somewhere, some Gödel theorem. For drawing, it started as being in the margin of notes. I was just taking, being bored / distracted / definitely paying attention in class. And I kind of went from enriched notes and interesting illumination for notes that I was taking with content, and then thinking, these are kind of interesting and fun. I could do them without the notes. I could just have a parallel piece of paper and carry that class to class, and then be working on that drawing surreptitiously in class. And so kind of arose from having access to pen and paper and being a little fidgety at times. And then I just continued to develop drawing, never built the skill of drawing even a realistic coffee cup or a face. I like abstractions and symbolism. And so just started, and for many years continued with just black ink on paper, and then eventually expanded into some red ink. It's a big life change. Everyone goes through it at a different time, but introduced a few other colors, and also started introducing some words and text, and playing a lot with words and symbolism and just layout on the page, and all these other fun features kind of came in, as well as doing a lot of partner and group drawing, which is what my partner and I call partner pen play in parallel, or PPPIP. So we developed that over the course of our relationship and wrote a paper on it that kind of jokingly juxtaposed that drawing game with sex bots and with the future of relationships. But partner drawing has also been really fun because it's a way where two or more people can be having this shared experience. They're switching pens, the paper's rotating. No one's a professional artist. It's all chill, talking, reflecting. And then there's this really special artifact that's produced. And so alone and during times where I should have been doing something else, or just together and spending quality time with friends and other people, I've just done a lot of drawing. And so to then scan the drawing and submit it to an art show was a natural step.
So you're essentially an abstract college doodler who's transformed to now be a heroic art NFT champion, right? Now you're forever in the NFT museum. What started as a stencil and probably a chemistry class.
Basically, and if it is the case that those 24 to 26 are the first representations of physical art on ETH blockchain or on different blockchains, I don't really know, and future archaeology will tell. But those cards, and then also the cards immediately following them of Max 27 to 29, it is a very special and lucky coincidence to be early and committed is the lesson to me, and to build those opportunities. And we never really even know, not just like what predisposes us to those opportunities, but we don't even really know what the free throws that we took were until way, way later. Like these drawings were made also before 2017. So there's so many ways in which it's like the work we do, the proof of work, the pen on the paper, we don't really know how it plays out in the future. And yes, my PhD was not in stenciling, but maybe my second one will be.
Oh man, how beautiful. So I did, for those that are listening, I pulled up card number 24. It's called Complexity, right? Currently there's 24 owners of the wrapped version, 33 total. And then I move over to the Curio website because since they are ERC 20, there's more that exist. So there's 333 that actually exists that's unwrapped. I know there's a little bit of a story behind it with between like some being lost forever. I don't know if it's this one specifically, but first, as this is titled Complexity, it does look quite complex. Tell us a little bit about this one. Which PE class did you draw this in, and and what's the meaning behind the title of Complexity?
Awesome. Well, first let's cover the numbering of the three cards and their titles. So maybe go back to the Curio page. All right. Yeah. So 24 has 333, 25 is 222, and 26 is 111. So that was how many they asked I wanted to create. And as somebody who was used to creating one of ones and physicals, even 2 is like high replication for me. And as a scientist, then 3, you can get a variance, you're done with the experiment. So 300, 200, 100, these numbers seemed like just a huge amount. But also I didn't really have that much of a prior. So I just kind of threw out those numbers. And again, with this sort of completion and holistic integrity through variation, there's a pattern within the 333, 222, 111, and there's also differences. Then, pretty shortly after Curio was rediscovered, because of the modified ERC20, they, in their unwrapped form, like you mentioned, they can't be directly sold, for example, on OpenSea. And so they didn't have kind of the modern like ERC, whatever it is, 1155 or 721, forget which one, affordances. Some individuals in the community created a wrapper contract, and that wrapper contract, I don't know the technical details there either, but basically it kind of like ate the cards. Like you could wrap them, but you couldn't unwrap them. So some of each were lost. 26 with 111, I believe that 5 were lost. So there's like 106, and 26 is the lowest copy number, like of all the curios. So it kind of made like the rate limiting step to assembling the full set. It made that even just a little bit rarer. And so that's a little bit on the numbering and yeah, on the pattern of the numbering. And then there's some like ongoing, basically research projects into how many are active in circulation with Curio, work with the graph protocol and trying to discover zombie wallets and all of that. But those are the 3 cards, which is Complexity 24, Passion 25, and Education 26.
I know that there are a lot of archaeologists, and it does appear that there's a handful of people going through various methods to first determine how many NFT-like contracts were deployed between a certain time frame. There was somebody that I was talking with, which I won't share their name, but they worked with a dev of Etherscan to determine how many NFT-like contracts were deployed between 2015 and I think 2018. I think the number they've come up close with is around like 30,000, 35,000, although a lot of them are broken or a lot of errors. And so there's probably a lot out there. And then you have to go through the process of, okay, if there are that many, then you have to go find the devs, because how all of those like ERC, I think there's actually pre-ERC21 tokens, but they're all, like you mentioned, they're all modified contracts. So they all have these like specific nuances in it, and causes a lot of errors. For example, like V1 punks, right? You can't trade them on the open market. You have to wrap them, or else there's an exploit where I think the buyer or the seller can get the money and then also revert the transaction to get the NFT back itself. So there's all these weird things, and with dead, and then you get the nuance of dead wallets, where there's people who purposely don't interact with the wallet, although they do have the keys, so that the price can jump up, and then they eventually can dump it at a higher rate, right? Because it's like the same idea with Bitcoin, where anytime a wallet moves from 2009, 2010, the market begins to freak out, because it's like, oh, is that one of Satoshi's fake wallets? Is it somebody who has hundreds of thousands of coins getting ready to dump? There's all these different things. So it might be tough to know, but from your end, working with the graph, which is pretty much like a Google of ETH, how has that progress come along so far?
Yeah, so I understand that project as being able to carry out different queries. It's a decentralized protocol that allows queries to be constructed for different blockchain events and networks. And so I hope it serves as a useful resource for the people who are interested in that level of analysis, I guess, on Curio. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we are on complexity, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so complexity means a lot of things to a lot of people, just like the other two pieces, 5 with passion and 26 with education. So I kind of choose single word titles, at least in this situation, because with a title and with a drawing, it's not the only way to do abstract art or symbolic art, but if it's meaningful for someone else, literally, who am I to say what it means? So I just moved the pen and scanned it. It's out of my hands. So again, if it's meaningful for somebody and they see what they want to see, then I'm the last person to say no to that. But what I can speak to is kind of, again, how that process of like choosing a pattern and finding local meaning generates more of a holistic pattern at the end. That local meaning making and the rigor of local meaning making and the way that it can emergently create something that's like bigger than any little squiggle, it's right at home in blockchain, where you need to kind of have that bitwise precision on every single transaction, yet each transaction is no more or less than basically just like a addition. And so there's like something like meaning that comes in the sequence and in the juxtaposition of all of these calculations. And it's also very much like, again, coming from studying insects and the ants, like each pebble move by an ant, it may or may not make sense in isolation, but enough of those get juxtaposed and you get basically natural architecture. And in fact, the way in which simple behavioral rules of entities interacting with their environment leads to complex outcomes, and the ways that we can study patterns across different systems, like in this case, art, blockchain, ants, brains, economies, cities, all these different kinds of systems, that is complexity science, or just complexity. And so that's a transdisciplinary area that I've been interested in and involved in organizing for a long time. And so here, I started in the middle, or I guess near the top, with some of my favorite shapes, which are like tetrahedra, but of course paper's flat. So the way to represent the tetrahedra is like a triangle, and then kind of connecting to a suggested fourth point with a dashed line, and then filling in some gaps with dots. And then I started that kind of squiggle pattern. and then added a few more islands of tetrahedra, just kept on squiggling and squiggling. And it actually feels more expansive. Like it feels like it should be another drawing on top because it kind of has the illusion that it continues off the page. And so that's just the way that I constructed it, starting in the middle with what I was thinking simply, or not thinking, just thinking, here's a shape I can do, starting with what I could do, completing and connecting the dots from there. And then just after basically the first shell was completed, it's just kind of like plug and chug, like just add more and don't mess up.
It's quite fascinating how your brain works. So the inspiration behind this comes from your profession and passion, and you'd say this mimics almost like the ant world, the ant process, where they hive and they circle around certain foods, or the queen, or the anthill. All right, this could be representative of an anthill of some sort.
Nice. Yes, it's almost like the little dots in the middle. Those are like ants hiding there, and then they have a bunch of outposts. They're polydomous, which means they have many nests. Some species just have one nest. Other species have like different outposts. That's the polydomous species. So, and every time I look at it, I just try to see it fresh. So, like, I had been thinking about it in terms of like the ants making modifications in the way that the art was constructed, but it's like, it also does kind of look like an ant's nest, and then like energy or foraging activity radiating out from it.
That knowing the background, that's the first thing that comes to mind is looking at an anthill from above, and you see all of the ants marching around with the little pockets like you see here. How long did it take for you to draw this? Do you remember? And were there any rough drafts, or was this first attempt?
There's definitely no rough drafts. For the ones that are pattern based fully, there's no point in a rough draft because the challenge is in just carrying the simple pattern through. Maybe there's a sheet of scratch paper with just like a few little tests, make sure the pen was working basically. And I didn't like clock time, obviously, and probably did it in many sessions, but for the drawings for like these type that are full page, very detailed and going for high precision, they probably take 20 to 30 hours.
Jeez.
And it was in a time when I had more time. Now I am into like rapid drawing, and symbols and words help evoke a lot of meaning without requiring some of the intensity. That to create meaning through abstraction is challenging, and one can walk the more minimalist route, like something evocative, like a beautiful line. And it's kind of like, if you nail that curve, it's great. And it could take 15 seconds. Or there's kind of a pathway to meaning with abstraction and symbolism, but it's based upon like demonstrating that there was real care applied to it.
I can tell there's definitely a lot of care and specificity that was put into it. I now have open number 25. It's called Passion. And I'm going to take a guess right here. To me, it looks like you're looking through a microscope at some sort of like microorganism with some of the smaller cells on the outside. Maybe I'm completely off, but tell me what the inspiration and the idea is of Passion.
Cool. Well, passion, it's what drives us in our personal life and in our careers, if we can find that balance. And so here I'd imagine that it was not dissimilar in its approach from 24. I drew the central motif first, and yeah, that looks like a seahorse or an unfurling budding plant. So that sometimes to me kind of invokes like, it's almost like the yearning or the passion of the seed for the sun when it breaks through into the light. And then the drawing wasn't done. Had to add more pen. So then just as soon as, again, you know, 1 square inch of this triangle pattern had been done, it was just a question of taking deep breaths, staying in the zone, not messing up. And just, again, it's so fascinating how repetition can create meaning and can draw attention in a way where it's like, we don't need to just bedazzle with different motifs and different themes. Sometimes just a few elements being repeated really intentionally and very carefully can be meaningful. And also, especially now in our era of kind of mass-produced AI art, which wasn't really a thing several years ago. So that's like very interesting to see. And as an artist and tech person, I'm just very fascinated how this will all turn out. All the kinds of computer-aided art, textual, you know, writing and visual art, different styles. But it's almost like there's the uncanny valley when, you know, the robot it's not indistinguishable from a human, but it's also not like R2-D2. And so it's in this kind of space that's like creepy or like a little bit disconcerting. I don't know if there's something analogous in art, but I feel like when something has organic variability and some variation, if it were perfect, I don't think it's possible to draw perfectly, but if it were literally like graph paper or just wallpaper or fabric, or it wouldn't look as interesting. But this kind of reminds me of like scales or feathers or something. And so it has this like slight, just unintentional, but just as a matter of fact, small variability. And that's what perhaps creates like a coherent visual experience, because there's more similarity than not, but also there are slight variations over multiple spatial scales. And that helps kind of like draw the eye around. And like, again, it's a flat image, it's static. So anything that creates meaning and the opportunity for active engagement in a drawing, it can't always be designed, but when it's there, it's always, for me, a success.
And I'm glad that you point out about the generative AI movement that's happened and sparked within the last few years, because when you look in the traditional art world too, the imperfection of art is almost like an amplifier, right? A lot of, and even outside the world of art, when you look in the collectible space, misprints seem to always be more valuable than the original card because of the uniqueness to it, right? Can't really be copied because of that imperfect mark on the drawing or the little spot of paint that you accidentally put at the bottom of the painting. It adds more signature and more. It humanizes the artwork a little bit, or the collectible per se, to feel that it's not just a mass produced item of artwork or whatever it is that you're collecting at the time. So I'm glad that you point that out.
Yep.
And now moving over to number 26. This one is called Education. And again, it looks like this is kind of like a combination of both. You have the tetrahedras that's almost creating a box, and you can see some of the imperfections in the lines, which purposely done makes it a little bit more valuable, a little bit more sentimental. Tell us all about education. Give us the education of education.
Yeah, well, 26, A through Z. Didn't choose the numbers, but that's where it is. And this one, I created it certainly in multiple passes. It wasn't that I drew one box, completed it, and then moved on. It was like a many coats of paint situation. Like probably drawing just the bold largest triangle within each box, the ones that are kind of like alternating. Drew those to give alignment to the entire drawing. And then, okay, what's the next move? Okay, for all of them, I'm just going to go diagonal across and then connect the dots. Okay, complete them all. So then each small addition can be done like in one sitting, or even multiple additions can be done in one sitting, which helps keep the reproducibility really high. Like there are some sort of variations in this because it is just hand drawn, but like overall, there's a lot of similarities amongst the squares. And that kind of multiple coats of paint motif for me has always also been the nature of education, like learning a language or learning about a scientific field. It's all good to not have completed the book. We're just reading the book. And so we're not even going to understand every word, every sentence, every paragraph, but it's like many coats of paint. We go over it many times. We unpack it. We approach it with fresh eyes. We come back tomorrow. And like that approach to education has kept me in the game for a long time. And so I just really find it awesome. And to whatever extent I contributed it, an honor that like the rate limiting step of Curio full set collection is actually like education, and it's like priceless to have education and to learn, and that's what lasts
forever. I'm gonna read.
And then on the misprint side, just because if you're interested, so go to the image, and then on the very top right of there's a little extra, a little bit down. There's a little extra one little nub right there.
Right here. Oh wow! Yeah. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, just total slip of the pen. R.I.P.
R.I.P. Yeah, I like this one. You could see it like almost curves at a point. It's almost like those. It's almost like those things that you look at that like kind of messes with your eyes, turns to different colors, different wavelengths. Like I forget what the name is for it, but that's kind of what it is when I look like it's like the abstraction of it.
There's like magic eye and visual illusions and yeah, like,
visual illusions. Yes.
Art is about perception, and visual perception is amazing and very interesting. And so when there's a visual artifact, whether it's kind of like a the spinning ballerina, or whether it's some lines that are constructed by a computer in a way where like different stuff happens, one wheel looks like it's rotating, all these different visual illusions. It's like, that's actually an opportunity to interrogate the implicit or the subconscious way in which we do make sense of the visual world. So I totally agree. Like just looking at the center of the drawing, in the periphery, things do look more curved. And then, at least for me, and then I look to this, but then it's not curved. And then another region is curved, and it's like, it could be playing tricks on you if it were a video, but it's static. So we're bringing that sort of like dynamic perception. It's a projection. It's not like the image is changing. And so like, those are really fun, interesting things to think about. And it's the basis of how we quite literally see things differently, which is everybody's going to be projecting different meaning and different like priors onto the picture. And so the picture is a piece of shared culture, and that's what allows people to like compare their perspectives.
Right. Yeah. This piece of artwork it's pretty analogous to, and it's pretty analogous to kind of like this political world that we're moving in, where two individuals on different sides of the political spectrum look and see the same thing happen, and they analyze it completely different. And then the output of what they're analysis is complete and opposite ends of the spectrum. It's like everyone's watching the same show, but through two different filters and TV screens. And this is kind of what art is, because my eyes gravitate down to the bottom left, but some people maybe to the top right. And for some people it means education. Some people it just means ant colonies. It could be a whole host of things.
Yes, it's almost like art, modern art, or just symbolic art. It's like the model system of differences in perspective. Like the blank canvas is the ultimate boxing ring for people projecting their beliefs onto it. And then, yes, real world events provide us with content that in one sense seems very well structured. Like, you know, it was Mr. X in the kitchen with a candlestick. Like, what else do you need to know? It's like, well, actually a lot. People have different narratives about Mr. X or about the kitchen or whatever it is. And so we totally do see a lot of parallels between art, different stakes, and different regimes of attention, different focus systems. But yes, definitely. And then on the flip side, when we're in a consumer culture, what else do we have other than virtue signaling or disagreeing about our interpretation of art? And then I'd kind of bring it back to the partner drawing. What if there was two people rotating a piece of paper so that one's left was one's right later, and then we're changing colors of pens, you know, all the colors that we could use, and we're co-creating, and then somebody makes a modification and someone's like, well, I wouldn't have done that modification, but you didn't do it. The other person did it. Now you can do a yes and pen is special because you can never erase it. You can only add your own drawing or somebody else's drawings. And so then instead of having, again, like two people in the art gallery of politics debating whether they agree or disagree about some blank canvas, what about two people in the cafe sharing perspective, co-creating something meaningful? That sounds like it could be like best of times rather than worst of times.
I hope it is for the best of times. I do want to read this little excerpt that I believe was submitted, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this was submitted originally within the artwork, because a lot of these, it's been now 5 years, and now that we're talking about it's much similar. So, inspired by brains, ant colonies, and other complex systems, my art explores how global patterns arise via local relationships. The production of a drawing for me is actually not unlike the mining of a blockchain, an intricate process that can be laborious to perform perfectly, but with an intrinsic coherence that is self-evident after completion. Now, with the creation of Curio Cards, the metaphorical mapping between cryptocurrencies and my art is meaningfully strengthened. Indeed, now more than ever, we are seeing the fusion of art with technology and science, reminding me of a favorite quotation by Goethe: "Science arose from poetry, and when times change, the two can meet again on a higher level as friends." Daniel Friedman in early 2017. And now that we've discussed the three pieces of artwork, and we've gone over the original submission, has your thought process changed at all from this original framing to now? Here we are 5 years later, and we've gone through a year of this rediscovery, and we've had Christie's. We had the Christie's auction that had over a $1 million sale, and so now your art is actually memorialized forever within both auction houses, not just Christie's, but it was also at Sotheby's as well. And so, yeah, here's the article. And I think this was before, but it ended up selling for over $1 million. So yeah, tell us now, looking back and seeing that quotation to today, how has it changed, and what do you think about it?
I still stand by it. Many of the memes that motivated and excited me then, as I guess this conversation in June 22 unpacks, I'm still motivated by those similarities with brains and ant colonies, computers and blockchains. And I almost come to appreciate the delay in Curio. Okay, yes, great. I was this is a fun clip. Okay. Yeah. It's gonna happen fast. It's gonna happen way fast. I just appreciate I appreciate the delay in a sense because it's almost like it allowed space for the fundamentals and for, in some ways, tech and for the crypto sector to catch up with some of the insights that were drowned out in the froth of 2017, which was like, yeah, it's all good to have financial technology and fintech, and ideally, to orient it towards the betterment of everyone and supporting those who have the least, for example. But even when that is set right with fintech, there's still more to life than fintech. Like, to name just a few areas, there's art and history and culture, and there's like science and research and education. So maybe fintech is kind of like the sinews, could be argued, that runs through these, but also you could argue that history is the sinews that runs through the other ones, or the education and culture are what run through the others. So it's like, yes, and all of these things are important. And in 2017, it was a moment where very few were seeing some of the cultural relevance of like real, authentic, positive, artifact driven culture, not just like image meme driven pump moon memes, but something that is actually meaningful for people in the way in which like card 1 with the apple, or card 8 with the Mona Lisa, like those are iconic. They're images that not just do people recognize them, but they carry symbolic value. And so without some symbolic lexicon and some like common cultural touch points, again, it's literally like, whose moon memes are danker and whose tech is going to be better. I mean, that's an interesting discussion. I'm totally interested in tech, so it's like a discussion I was even having, but that's not the discussion we have talking about like the technical details of what paint people used. People interact with symbols and with culture and meaning. And I think that is like, amidst all of the ups and downs of numbers, is what the last few years with NFTs and also DAOs are starting to bring to the forefront, which is like, people need each other and they need meaning. And that happens kind of around the campfire, so to speak, not on the Wall Street floor or in the bank. Those are part of society, but like regular people are existing in like the layer with different symbols and shared meaning.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. Crypto and NFTs are this infusion of finance, tech, and culture. And then you take that infusion and then it kind of permeates into all of these disciplines and industries and markets that you would never even begin to think about, from this social media culture to photography, to music, to gaming, to now politics, to sovereign nations. There's a part of it within everybody, there's a part of crypto, whatever sector it is, that's going to find a home in a discipline. And I think we're all just trying to figure out what that is. And NFTs, and as Curio's the first art project on Ethereum, we know that art's always been a store of value. It's been around for as long as gold, if not longer. And it's always the primitive form of artistic expression and store value. And the way that it grows over time is to be determined, but that having Curio Cards as history intact, it'll never change. That's the first art project on Ethereum, unless something's uncovered, but it seems pretty unlikely at the time.
It's almost like art as a store of meaning too. And just a little bit up, there's that D School one right there. So that was like, to the left of that.
Oh, like
left with just in cursive. Yeah, there you go. So like DeFi, decentralized finance, D school takes up many of the hours of the day for many people's lives. And so D school is actually like a project that many people are working on, and hopefully more in the future, where we're kind of DeFiing, but not just adding bonding curves and smart contracts to education. This isn't just the fintech plus education. Like, it's actually a real rethinking about how we could make empowering sense-making structures for all ages and different ways of learning. DeSci, decentralized science, I think that's going to be something that is building on the open science movement and is able to connect cryptographic tools, yes, financial, including like the ability to fund and reward research, but also cryptographic tools like zero knowledge proofs, being able to document scientific research in a way that is basically high integrity and accessible to different research teams, and to communicate the work and demonstrate precedence. So those are all fun. So here we're going in reverse chronological order through my Flickr portfolio. I love America symbols. And so I've drawn, it's kind of like the state quarters thing. Like, I've done a huge number of state images and like different logos for different states. Any friend who I have in a different state, I'll just like make them a drawing, like different cities, different symbols, Decentral Intelligence Agency, seal of state of Nevada. There you go.
Home. That's home right. The home right there, baby. Home right there. So we are going in reverse chronological order. There's the California bear too. I'm gonna scroll to, there's like 10 whole pages here. When
all of those are probably within the last, okay. This is very early. Mm-hmm. This is the first page, right?
Yes, this is the first page. So when 2009, is that correct?
So I was in high school.
Wow. But you could see this is the early works which inspired these cards, and you could see there's some similarity to it.
Yeah. So it's, again, as mentioned, it was purely black and white. Very few external symbols. Like, I wasn't doing any motifs that would be like externally recognizable, and no words, but patterns. And I guess part of the comedy is I don't think I'm any better at drawing. It's been several thousands of hours, but I truly cannot say that I'm any better at drawing. I like it still, which I'm happy about. And I think there have been several pieces made that are great along the way. But it cracks me up to no end, pretty much. Like, I might even say I couldn't draw this today. I just would be like, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to. I might see that pattern, think, okay, I drew 2 square inches. It looks like it could be cool if I were to complete it, but this was like in undergrad, and I was just with a lot more time to explore these different things. Yes. So it's been a fun journey. And I mean, if people look through the portfolio, they'll find many fun motifs evolving, like DNA stuff so actually this one with a purple was the first color image that I made. And interestingly, this one was actually colored on accident. It was a black pen. And then I believe I dropped a droplet of water, or maybe even like lab ethanol or something on it. And then it diffused purple, because some inks will diffuse depending on like what solvent is poured on it and like the attributes of the ink and all this other stuff. Like, some of them do blur and it's like one color or another, but this one I was just like, whoa, it totally looked amazing just with one drop. And then so I continued blurring, and it kind of opened up another dimension of color. Like also when I was younger, I played drums. I still tap on my pad once in a while, but I was almost like and there's education on its side actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this was originally created in 2015.
Yeah. Playing drums, I felt like there was enough degrees of freedom and opportunities for like creativity just with rhythm that it was almost like there's too many degrees of freedom sometimes with all the colors. Like if I have all the colors in front of me, I will just pick a very restricted subset and then try to make something with a subset. So
why do you think that is? Why do you prefer black, white, and kind of like the grays over these colorful, vibrant projects? Is it something about the expressionism of it that is what pushes you that way?
You know, I love viewing colorful images. Like Kandinsky is one of my favorite artists, and Kandinsky just absolutely dances with such a like expressive range of colors. Again, I just like see a lot of opportunity with black and red. I think, well, if I use no colors, then there's nothing on the page, which is like kind of deep, but it's also, you know, it's like too deep. Okay, then if I can use one color, I'll use black. And then what is the next color to add after black? Well, for me, it's basically red. Like orange or yellow, I don't think would go perfectly as well. Blue's very close to black. Any darker color is going to be closer to black. And so I just love the red, black, and white. You know, what's black and white and red all over? A newspaper. No, I just like the way that the colors work together. And I find that it allows, like, you can see both. Like in several of these, you can see what's happening with the black, and you can also totally see what's happening with the red. And I think if there was more colors, yes, on one hand, it increases the expressivity, but it becomes a little bit more difficult to track like 3 interpenetrating layers. And so just, this is like the next level, but it doesn't create too many uncertainties, just like from the artist or from maybe even from the viewer's perspective.
It's quite beautiful and quite fascinating. And as we go, you could see some of these get a little bit more color, and these become a little bit more elaborate. That one,
the very doodles. Colorful one, a little bit up. That one was a partner drawing. So like with crayons. So that's why it's like very, very different in its structure.
Yeah, it is.
But like we kept rotating the paper and just shading things in and just flipping through the crayons. And every single partner drawing I've done, it's not what any of those individuals could have made alone. There's times where I've drawn with people who like actually could draw like faces or could draw figures or coffee cups or whatever. And it's like, they are always shocked as well. And people who have no drawing experience and children, just everyone has fun, and it always makes something special. And so there's a few partner drawings on my Flickr.
Quite, dude. I could literally sit there and just flick through it all day. I did now open up your website, and as we could tell through the conversation, you have a heavy influence in entomology, which is the study of insects. You have an art background, and we can tell you're a student of education, especially by the way you like present your adjectives. It's a very like technical background. You could tell that you've been in biology for quite some time. Now we sit here. You've been in school and participating in the science field for what, 15 years now at this point. If that artwork was 2009 and you're still in school, you could say it's been going on for quite some time. And now we're about a year removed from the Curio Card rediscovery. Is NFTs and art on the blockchain something of the past? Have you? I know you with active inference labs seems to be where your focus is now. Have you thought about trying to find some sort of intersection for both of these endeavors that you've engaged in, or is act in lab the focus for the immediate future for you?
Great questions. I think that just like that quote that you read from the end of my card description, I believe that science and art are going to continue developing and pollinating each other, hopefully in my own life, but more broadly, art and science are going to continue their dance. I think that a lot of the techniques arising from this NFT art period will translate into the way that we are using cryptographic techniques in research. And I'd hope that with Active Inference Lab, which is a participatory online lab, that we might be able to implement in hopefully positive ways some of like the lessons that we're all getting in the crypto space. So like what we're seeing here is this is one project of the Active Inference Lab, which is the live streams that we produce. So these are like paper discussions and presentations of various researchers. Like here's Mark Solms. He's a neuropsychiatrist. He's talking about where's consciousness located in the brain. And so it's like two colleagues with me, Dave and Steven here. We're all participants learning by doing. Mark Solms is a world famous researcher, but in this technologically enabled world, we're able to like connect with Professor Solms here and like with the live chat going, it gets amazing and hilarious. It's just the combination of like thinking on one's feet and anything goes in a sense that I saw in live streaming and I always thought was like a super engaging format, which is why people will watch live streams about like basically nothing, combined with, and you have the subtitles are in a different language, which is awesome because we translate the transcripts for all of these live streams to help increase accessibility of the work. And yeah, people just make amazing comments. Mm-hmm. We have an amazing distributed learning community, and there's a ton of opportunities for people to participate to whatever level of activity they desire in Active Lab. And yeah, just like it's an honor to be in Curio. It's something, again, I truly didn't expect it would play out this way. And I'm going to keep on drawing. I'm going to keep on doing research. And now there's this fun twist where people from around the world also request that I make them drawings and send them NFTs and such. And if it can complement and sometimes even support these other endeavors, then amazing.
What opportunities have presented themselves since the Curio Card rediscovery that doesn't have to do with your recent lab work? Are there new entrepreneurial pursuits that you've considered pursuing because of the recent fame attached to Curio Cards?
I think it's a good question. You know, I don't have the control group. I don't know what would have happened over the last 18 months or however many in some Curio-free universe. I believe that the work on decentralized science, I wouldn't have seen the immediacy around it, and hopefully that ends up being kind of the seed of some very important work. But I'm a research postdoc, and so I hustle to learn and teach and serve. And so I actually am quite flexible with what I pursue. And so already was pursuing a lot of different avenues. And yeah, I just hope that for the duration of my postdoc, like till the end of 2023, there's a fun ants art crossover. So these ants, like I collected them in Arizona in the field and then slowed them down on ice and then use combinatoric paint to label them individually. So like, oh, that's green, orange, orange left the nest at, this time. Yeah, these are nice.
Wow. Well, first I want to say, love the hair from the 2015 presentation. Oh, love it.
I'm pretty short hair now, but I've had some very long hair in the past.
So tell me, what is it about ants that's had your attention for now over a decade? What's specific about them that first caught you some inspiration all the way back to 2009 or maybe even earlier to then continue to pursue your Ph.D. on the collective behavior in ants?
It's a good question. I think of the many things that I like about studying ants. Here's the PIP paper from 2018 with Alexandra. Of the many things I like about ants, the questions that ant researchers ask and address in studies are very often like literally the questions that children and all manner of people ask too. How do they make decisions? What is that ant doing? How did they build that? Like, those are our questions too. So the pervasiveness of ants being like on every landmass in the world, basically, except Antarctica. And the fact that they're so clearly, these are all partner drawings with Alexandra. The fact that they're like, the ants are so dominant and powerful and able to solve complex problems together, yet also like inscrutable with their weird wandering, and they're very like different looking than vertebrates, and they use chemical communication and less so like symbolic verbal communication. And so like they're so alien but familiar. And the questions that people intuitively ask are the ones that like transfer to address the problems that we need. How do we manage traffic jams without a central controller? How do we allocate food so that every larva is taken care of? Like, those are the big questions. That's one lens on it. It's not like the only way to ask the big questions, but I've just found it really powerful to be able to study ants from the molecular and the behavioral perspective and art, doing insect art. Insects are beautiful. And so just being able to like study and meme and model the ants, and then just like, whoa, there's 15,000 species. We barely know even a few of them in depth. We have some pictures of a lot of them, but like, we don't know how many queens they have. We don't know what kind of behaviors they do at night. So
I love your passion. It's quite fascinating. It leads me, because you've been in science now for so long, and the educational space. You brought up the idea, which I can't stop thinking about, which is de-science, right? Decentralized science of a sort. When you bring up that word, what comes to mind, and what practice or tools in science you think needs to be decentralized? Because when I think of we'll call it Web 2 science, you think the most decentralized aspect of it would be like the double blind trials and studies, right? Because you don't want to have some sort of bias. So maybe the blockchain can improve that even farther, because I know it's really tough to even get past a bias. That was the first thing that came to mind, but I'm just curious from your perspective.
Yeah, very interesting. Like double blinding and pre-registration of hypotheses so that people don't do Texas sharpshooting. You know, you shoot the side of the barn and then you paint the target around it, hypothesizing after the results are known. But you ask, like, what aspects of science are apt to be decentralized? When we were working on this DSci paper that we released in March 22, there was a very interesting like dialectic arising within the team. Some people were thinking more about the technologies that existed and about how they could be used to decentralize the information and financial and kind of techno power structures, like decentralized funding mechanisms instead of centralized funders, decentralized accreditation or peer review instead of the use of like centralized gatekeepers for some of those processes. So I think that's one aspect. And then another aspect is kind of like this technology independent way in which, as we move into a pluralistic and a multipolar scientific world, if not beyond science, we kind of have this like army of one, no man is an island kind of tension. Like we're all supposed to be making sense of a really complex world individually based upon like the info that we're getting dropped. But then it's also like obvious that it's too complex even for an expert in their niche area. So then it's like, it's getting dumped on our lap to do the sense making related to like public health, economics. I mean, and again, even if one were an expert in that area with specialized information sources or colleagues, they might not even be able to come to an effective conclusion. So I just see some openings and shiftings, really tectonic changes in the way that science participation and communication is and will be occurring. I think the ivory tower, even if it was decentralized ivy towers, and then we're going to have like a unidirectional science communication, like we'll write the article in like simple terms and kind of speak down to people who don't have the same expertise and just like give them the distilled version. It's like decentralization and inclusion means different people are going to be doing the research, and every step along the way, from the conceptualization to the design of the research experiment and the writing and the follow through and the communications afterwards, the post publication peer review, like all of these steps, I hope that we'll have new ways of doing things that take the best of what we've learned from previous scientific systems, like rigor and slow moving clarity, and connect it to a few memes and themes that like we're kind of drowning in, but we're not really digesting. And so I hope to see some improvements and resolutions there.
When you think of like the university model and how it's pretty much a completely gate-kept society, and how a lot of the presidents of the universities have kind of kept themselves or kept the boomers in charge of it. And when you follow people like Eric Weinstein talks about how the university model is just, it's kind of like rigged in a sense because of the crowdfunding mechanisms, which then has to give the research team a biasy to kind of assist with whatever that agenda is, and all these different mechanisms. I hope DSci can become a thing. There's a lot of central powers that are going to have to get pushed through, whether it's by brute force or by some sort of like intellectual and technical mechanics that are kind of circumvent what they think is actually happening.
Yeah. Don't know about every field. I know about science a little bit. And one thing I've always loved about science is like anyone can ask a question and improve the discussion and even like call out somebody who's being wrong. So even if they're the keynote speaker and they're getting paid to be there and this person is new to the field, they can totally raise a valid point. And so if it can be designed appropriately, high quality attention and people and talent, which includes people before they're traditionally recognized as having talent, like earlier and earlier in this developmental process, if those types of energies can be drawn positively towards DeSci systems rather than basically begrudgingly marching on the conveyor belt towards like the pipeline as we know it today, I think it's going to be like emperor has no clothes, because there's no one in science who's like so powerful that they can just decree the truth by fiat. And there's no institution. There's some that have big, financial endowments, but none of them are going to be able to make it unless they can adapt to a changing epistemic environment. So again, other sectors, I don't know what the transformations will be, but in science, I think there's an amazing opportunity for like a positive, value-driven, peaceful, all across the board improvement.
We need to donate to the public goods of science, something that Vitalik talks about a lot. And I think once crypto kind of moves past the immediate financial tools and moves into some of these public goods and educational models, that's when the revolution will really start, whether it's within the next year or two or the next decade.
Yeah, public goods for DeSci and D-School, and just research and education as public goods, and information commons, and like commons what's shared amongst us, and common sense, and being able to just like see the shared value and then design the game theory plus the social norms and have them work together so that it's like, we don't pollute our reservoir, and we do this. And so we're going to take an analogous approach to thinking about like the long-term informational issues. Like we want good info in the scientific corpus. We want accessible education. We want like, what do we want? Like clean water and sustainable water. And then what is going to be the systems design and the mechanisms that's going to get us there? And I think that will have just broad appeal. And the questions are numerous. Will it be able to come online fast enough and demonstrate value fast enough in a sort of like mixed and adversarial environment? I don't know, but there's a positive attractor North Star that hopefully we can start to move towards, instead of just moving away from what we maybe know we don't like, but without an alternative, we just disperse. And then like the powers that be stay the powers.
Quite fascinating the way that you describe it so elegantly, and even chronologically, it gives me a lot of faith that this can happen. I know there's going to be some turmoil and some obstacles, but as the technology in the community grows, both science and decentralized products, we'll get there. But Daniel, I won't take too much more of your time. We're getting into the weekend, Friday. We get to go out and have fun. Really appreciate you for coming on the show and sharing not only just Curio Cards, but the whole idea of Daniel the scientist, Daniel the artist, and Daniel the educator.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Jake. Super fun discussion, and best of luck to you and your audience.
Thanks. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Catch you next time.